Today we're going to be ranking every boss in Shadow of the Erdtree from worst to best. We've got a lot to get through, so I'm not going to waste any time. Let's get stuck in. I'm going to start by putting the good, bad and ugly of the reskin bosses in the trash. The Ghost Flame Dragons and Red Bears certainly stand out as the best of a bad bunch. With new designs and moves, they're as good as a reskin can get. I don't know why the Deathbird reared its pea head, but this encounter was horrendous. I didn't like them in the base game, and I'll tell you what, I certainly don't want them here. But the special dishonourable mention must go to Ancient Dragon Senesax. The already annoying lightning hitboxes became nightmare fuel in a body of water. Reskins are acceptable and do have a place in a game as large as Elden Ring, but here we have the worst selection of mini-bosses from the base game, scaled up to the DLC's difficulty to the point it becomes tedious. I'm convinced the Golden Hippo was a last-minute addition to the Shadowkeep. After 7 Soulsborne games, I refuse to believe he was intentionally put into this Harry Potter cupboard arena. In the trailer, we can see the Tarnish fighting him on a lake in the open. He would have been a lot less offensive had this been his arena. The lock-on point being the middle of the body rather than the head doesn't do him any favours, as you're fighting the camera as much as the Hippo. Otherwise, he's straightforward, with bite attacks in Phase 1 and ranged quill attacks in Phase 2. You're better off keeping your distance outside of his punish windows, as the hitboxes are massive. If he wasn't in the Shadowkeep, I would avoid him altogether, since the incantation he drops is doo-doo as well. Chief Bloodfiend is the only boss I forgot existed after my playthrough. He's just very mediocre. You can find this Discord mod hanging out in a cave of his own filth. He functions like a normal Bloodfiend, with a few extra attacks like Moog's Bloodflame Talons. The camera here was also a pain since it was drawn to his blood sausage. I think if you take the Chief as a package with Rivermouth Cave, it's a decent distraction. Discovering a blood cult through the collapsing floor was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Don't actually have anything else to say about him. Probably what bleed users look like IRL. Moving on. Count Ymir is the first of many NPC quote-unquote bosses on the list. He's very underwhelming to fight, with one projectile sorcery and a finger shield defensive spell. He also summons finger creepers to distract you. If you made it to this point of the DLC, you can defeat him in your sleep. In fact, his most threatening attack is having Jalan invading you before the fight. I think it would have been more impactful if Ymir was a part of the meta fight, absorbing her power and acting as a second phase rather than an NPC fight. But in his current state, he really just should have been an invader. Elden Ring's answer to Ronnie Pickering.
Oh, Ronnie Pickering!
Dryleaf Dane is another encounter that's pushing what I would consider a boss fight. Like Ymir, it seems unnecessary to stick a boss-sized health bar on an NPC. However, Dane has the benefit of introducing you to Dryleaf Arts. Dryleaf Arts. So you are fighting a unique NPC, giving it purpose. The moveset is so visually appealing, it gives you motivation to defeat him so you can start roundhouse kicking people in the head. I wish we had access to Dryleaf Arts before this fight so I could throw hands with Dane like a proper gentleman.
Let's have a bare knuckle fight then!
Next up, we have more NPC bosses. I'm going to group all the Mausoleum encounters together. Although they vary in difficulty, they equally all do the same thing well. Like Dane, they showcase new weapons, armor, and ashes of war, so you can see what new loot you're going to be rewarded with for defeating them. I think your enjoyment of these fights comes down to whether you like PvP, as they have a different pacing to them. Rather than learning combos and punish windows, you're making a read, baiting attacks, and taking a risk when attacking. For me, I'm not going to be seeking these guys out in future playthroughs because I like the fight. It'll be because I want the loot they drop instead. Special shout out to the Black Jail Knight for giving everyone who thought they were over leveled a reality check when entering the DLC. The worst Remembrance boss has to be Commander Gaius. He's just undercooked.
Fucking roll!
The charge attack was easier to dodge than players made it out to be. However, I can't deny it was on some Dark Souls 2 level hitboxes. Apart from that, he felt like a pretty standard mounted fight. Although that one combo where the pig goes hog wild was a pain in my ass.
Homeless asshole who probably fucked his pig. So sick of your
I don't fuck my pig.
You'll want to hit exceptionally hard to break his stance. I switched back to old Reliable to show him who was boss. Honestly, I was shocked when he dropped his Remembrance. I thought I was fighting a mini-boss, especially since he has a recycled music track. I'd be less critical if that was the case. They have patched Gaius' hitboxes since I fought him, so maybe he'll be less of a pain to fight in the future. What if instead of being called Black Knight Garou, his name was Freaky Knight Garou? And instead of attacking you normally, he tried to tongue punch your fart box instead. Edred and Garou are like the NPC fights, as they serve to showcase new spells. Edred has the Crucible Wings, and Garou this frog tongue attack that for some reason we're not allowed. I find it hilarious they made this attack for one enemy, and it's never seen again. Aside from that, they play like normal Black Knights. Idrid is certainly the more interesting of the two, as we didn't see many twin blade enemies in the base game, and his weapon allows him to be more aggressive, chaining together longer combos. My build utilised the Crucible incantations, so it was fun to duke it out with him to earn my wings. I know I had a good whinge about reskins, but I think this one is pretty good. The Curse Blades are tough for regular enemies, identifying as Apache helicopters they spin to win, often creating space when you finally have a chance to attack. And Labyrinth cloaks the arena in darkness, making him feel like a proper assassin in the process.
Me bomba!
The environmental change makes him difficult to predict, and the rocket-propelled grab attack coming out of the shadows was terrifying. The Curse Blades are used sparingly in the Land of Shadow, and Labyrinth does enough to make himself unique from the regular variant. I can't believe they made the Spy Kid's thumb into a boss. I'm conflicted on where to put Mita Mother of Fingers in the ranking. The lore and build-up to the boss fight feels like a culmination of the story from the base game. Her eldritch design reminds you how much Elden Ring has in common with Bloodborne, leaning into cosmic horror. However, the fight with Mita is pretty meta. I'll see myself out. Mita herself makes this fight easier by forcing you in front of her weak spot, as if you linger on her sides, she'll finger you. She does ramp the difficulty up in phase 2 when she turns into a biblically accurate angel and starts Beyblading around the arena and letting off explosions. However, if you get hit, there's plenty of time to heal between attacks, so she was on the easier side of the DLC bosses. She loses points for summoning finger creepers as well, because just why? No boss is improved by adding finger creepers. You ever look at Gale and think, you know what would make this even better? Finger creepers. Keep your hands to yourself. Next up is Divine Beast Dancing Lion. Sounds like a character straight out of Metal Gear Solid. The carnival puppet design goes incredibly hard, and there is a good boss here somewhere in the rough. This was my warm-up for the DLC, and man, it was intense. Setting the tone for what to expect. I love that the lion unlocks new moves and varies existing ones depending on what element he's using, creating a steep learning curve that keeps players on edge. However, the fight is held back by some technical issues. Blair Witch called, they want their cameraman back. I think I died more times to the camera having a seizure than due to any mistake I made. Oh, Precursor. You could just not lock on. And you'd be right, but with how much this boss flies around, I feel like you need to lock on to keep track of him. I also experienced some frame dips because of how much is on screen at one moment. This is a skill issue, but Dancing Lion often appeared as a blur on my screen, and I struggled to follow his actions. I wonder if he would have been better suited to a later stage in the DLC, given the fight's high mechanical demands and need for pixel-perfect positioning. The Lamenter was such a troll. I'm probably ranking him too high, but I had such a laugh fighting him. He feels like an evolution of the Fool's Idol archetype of boss, as he summons clones intermittently. However, rather than ignoring the clones and weeding out the real Lamenter, you'll want to wipe the clones out quickly, as at the end of the phase you'll receive a debuff for each remaining clone. Too many debuffs and it's instant death. It took me far too long to figure the gimmick out. He disappears for so long before summoning the clones. I was trying to use the Lamenting Visage to find him. It was actually kind of tragic, okay? And the whole time, he's just mocking you with this stupid laugh. Gimmick fights like this have a short shelf life, since once you know how to beat them, the challenge is gone. However, I'll give the Lamenter his 15 minutes of fame for giving me a good runaround. Next up is Ancient Dragon Man. He was fun for an NPC fight and a cool introduction to the Dragon questline, which is a large portion of the DLC. You first battle a weaker version as an invader before encountering his physical form in the cave. He puts up quite a fight as well. It's his job to test you and make sure you're worthy to continue up the Jagged Peak. Ancient Dragon Man. Such a stupid name. The amazing Ancient Man Dragon.
My name's the Human Spider.
He uses a few dragon incantations, which did catch me off guard, but his main selling point is showcasing the Dragon Slayer katana. One of the more unique NPC fights in the DLC, Man-Dragon is okay in my book. Yori Elder Inquisitor has some good ideas. His summons feel like attacks rather than just adds, so you don't feel like you're getting ganked, and his spells aren't too annoying, forcing you to keep moving during the fight, such as the Spyro incantation. I think his high poise makes him divisive in the community, or rather, he doesn't flinch like you would expect a scrawny mage weakling to. I'd argue this makes him interesting as he becomes more of a threat than a boss like Renala, who is easy to bully into a stun lock. Otherwise, he would have been a forgettable pushover. Leda and her allies are the best NPC encounter From Software have made. It's not a boss, but it seems fitting to include them. Your actions throughout the DLC directly affect how the scenario unfolds. It was 5v1 in my playthrough until Tholier and the Goat Ansbach arrived to even the odds. And man, did I need the assist, because my former allies had me stressing. It's mandatory to take Freya down ASAP because she's an absolute unit. Hornsent has low HP, but his ranged attack has the potential to one-shot you. And don't even get me started on more. Yeeting pots of Melania's bathwater. The dialogue feels like Shadow of the Erdtree's emotional climax, with several NPC questlines wrapping up here. Genuinely, this is the best implementation of NPC questlines FromSoft has done, and I'm looking forward to where they take it in the future. Ramina was a little unremarkable. Elden Ring has conditioned me to constantly being attacked, and at times Ramina felt passive by comparison. It was nice to have a slower paced fight with well telegraphed attacks. Her simpler moveset was a nice breather, with her being sandwiched between Mesmer and Radahn. Her only vaguely threatening move is the butterfly explosion that inflicts Scarlet Rot. I'm not a massive fan of bosses inflicting status effects, I find it irritating. She had me looking cross-eyed for most of the fight, but when my eyes met in the middle, there she was. Now I finally have them all. I also appreciate the visual cues on her model for certain attacks, such as the pink flash before her ground pound. I think more bosses could benefit from audio-visual cues. Somehow Radahn returned. I'm very conflicted about where to place Radahn on this list. Phase 1 is nearly perfect, easy to read with plenty of damage windows and combo variations to keep you on your toes. The only issue I have is the triple horizontal slash. It is possible to dodge it. No, I don't know how to. I will try and be objective with Phase 2. It's visually a mess. There's too much visual effects on screen, and the Michelesta's hair obscures many of Radahn's animations. Congratulations to my boy Moog for beating the allegations. I'm sorry for doubting you. Visual clutter is not a good way to increase the difficulty of a boss. Ironically, many of the attacks I struggled with were present in Phase 1, only now the golden rays made it impossible for me to understand what was happening. And I reached a point fighting Radahn where I accepted I simply do not have the mechanical skill required to beat the second phase. I can't! So even when I defeated Radahn solo, I didn't feel a sense of achievement when I won, only relief that it was over. If they bring out a Mikula Buzzcut patch or tone down the VFX, I might fare better, but for now this boss is not for me, and it left a sour taste in my mouth at the end of what was otherwise a perfect DLC. Demi-Human Swordmaster On set the bar too high for dungeon bosses. He was the first boss I fought after the Black Jail Knight, and he's Yoda. He's basically Yoda.
Surprised?
I steamrolled him initially as he's easy to poise break. However, when he fights back, he has some serious moves. His agility paired with his stature make him a little whirlwind of death. And once he starts attacking, he doesn't stop. He hits surprisingly hard too. And the blue aura on his attacks is so visually appealing. Definitely on the easier side, but that doesn't make him a bad fight. You'd be forgiven if you didn't recall Crucible Knight Devonia. Almost no effort went into her presentation. Despite being one of the DLC's more unique encounters, she technically isn't a boss, which I find sad because she's well designed, incorporating everything you would expect from a Crucible Knight, from devastating slow wind-ups to ground stomps and shape-shifting incantations. Although she absolutely has the worst helmet of the three. Like, what is that? Come on! Devonia's Centaur transformation attacks are the highlight of the fight. It wouldn't surprise me if From got overly ambitious with Devonia and rushed the rest of the encounter. It would explain the absence of music and recycling Ordovis's vortex on the hammer. I have a theory the Crucible Knights were intended to have a wider role in the DLC. Idrid and Garu both use Crucible incantations and share the Erdtree Knight music track, played for Tree Sentinels and Crucible Knights. Pure speculation, was this pair originally intended to be Crucible Knights but changed to Mesmer Knights instead, as Crucible incantations were exclusively used by Crucible Knights before these two. It would explain why they were gifted boss status. Let me know what you think below. This may be polarizing, but next up is R'Larna, Twin Moon Knight. R'Larna has a high skill ceiling for finding openings in her relentless combos. Her smooth animations and hitboxes reward good positioning, which you'll need because she is brutal. Jump her moon AoE for an easier time and use lightning as the water in the arena amplifies the damage. This environmental interaction pops up several times in the DLC, which I really enjoy. Shadow of the Erdtree encourages build experimentation. I found myself trying combinations and consumables I'd never use in the base game. I spent enough runes on boiled crab for Boggart to set up bubblegum shrimp in Liurnia. R'Larna's second phase ups the ante, increasing her reach and giving her some nasty ranged attacks. She had me stressing as it feels like she never stops attacking you. Her elemental combos remind remind me of someone. Died 2016, born 2024. Welcome back, Pontiff Sullivan. R'Lana is the boss I'm most looking forward to fighting again, as I don't feel like I got a good handle on her combos. I think I'd find more of a flow fighting her with a dex build, and I can see her climbing my ranking in the future. Discovering the Erdtree Avatar's Arena was a highlight of the DLC for me. I bumbled to the tree's base and realised I wasn't being poisoned or rotted by the sap on the floor. Am I the only one that wants to take a bath in it? Only to promptly shit myself when the pissed off sunflower came to life. The avatar is well tuned, with attacks evolving as the difficulty ramps up across its 3 phases. Most of Shadow's bosses excel in this. They ease you into the fight, using the word ease loosely. You learn basic moves before the difficulty and aggression ramps up with new attacks and variations. For example, his homing magic projectile changes through each phase, requiring different dodge timings to avoid. I can imagine Miyazaki laughing at everyone reacting to him getting up for a 3rd phase. The only attack I struggled with was the AoE explosion in phase 3. The timing is honestly evil. You might just want to up your holy resist and tank it, otherwise the Erdtree Avatar is a very manageable boss. The build up to the Putrescent Night was incredible. The descent into the cage at the end of the map builds up the fear of the unknown. The classic FromSoft plunge into the abyss tells you a banger of a boss awaits. I remember seeing this goober in the trailer and thinking, that looks stupid. Never have I been so wrong. PK's design needs to be studied. The way he dismounts and incorporates the horse into his combos is creative. There's a nice rhythm to this fight that makes his attacks satisfying to dodge. The blue flame ruined me to start with, however once I realised you were supposed to jump it, the fight became much more enjoyable. It makes the encounters so much easier. He hits like a truck, but his health bar is on the lighter side to compensate. The only issue with this guy is spacing. Sometimes the knight's combos leave him slightly out of reach, causing you to miss your attack window. But it's something you can work around, and it doesn't subtract from the quality of the fight.
The Death Knight is as close as we'll get to a Godwin the Golden fight. Michael Zaki heard the complaints about the Catacomb bosses and cooked. I went through the fog wall fully expecting an Erdtree watchdog. Safe to say, these guys blew me away. Both variations have a nice flow to the fight, balancing long combos with clear openings. The visual spectacle of them zipping around the arena made me feel like I had stumbled onto something special. They're relatively well tuned, however this is another boss that could benefit from a small buff, as the Death Knight has weak poise compared to the other bosses in the DLC. The grab attack comes out quickly, but if you learn the visual cues it's easily avoided. The Death Knight sucking the life out of you to heal himself is fitting for Godwin's personal guard. Paired with G-Man's face in the background, these guys got me hyped for a Prince of Death boss fight at the end of the DLC.
Midra is the hardest boss in Shadow of the Erdtree. I never understood the complaints about the DLC's difficulty until I saw Midra's first phase. His attack pattern was insane. His small stature and hitboxes make him almost impossible to hit. You'll want to keep him at mid-range as he utilises the Howl of Shabriri, causing madness build-up. However, be ready to dodge as you'll be at prime distance to trigger his grab attack. Miyazaki, nerf Midra and my life is yours. Sarcasm. Jokes aside, Midra was one of my favourite bosses in the DLC. It was cool to see FromSoft experiment with the area leading up to him, turning Elden Ring into a horror game.
He's just standing there, menacingly.
The atmosphere of the woods leading into the mansion had me on edge. Having a Lord of Frenzied Flame boss almost felt like fan service. Midra moves slowly with purpose. Each swing is well telegraphed with precise dodge timings, and he closes the distance rapidly if you try to back up and heal. He feels like an old school Dark Souls boss. I know I said I didn't like bosses employing status effects, but it isn't overly oppressive here, and I think I only molded once the entire time I was fighting him.
Oh dear, we are in trouble.
The only thing stopping me from ranking him higher is how easily he staggers. Seriously, I lost count of how many times I unintentionally broke his poise. Also, I wish there was a special interaction if you had inherited the Frenzied Flame from the Three Fingers. My penultimate pick is that dragon. What was his name again?
I will riddle with holes your rotten hide with a hail of harpoons, with every last drop of my being.
Thumbails was an absolute treat. I love how FromSoft keeps one-upping their dragon fights. Bayle is the best example of difficulty not overshadowing the overall fight. Every time I died to Bayle, I felt like it was my fault. The philosophy of Elden Ring boss design has always been positioning heavy, and Bayle is the pinnacle of that. Although his lightning AoEs can be a bit much once he has transformed, learning optimal positioning for each attack is rewarding. He plays similar to Medea, with the best strategy being locking onto his head and standing in front of him, rather than going for the legs. Or leg. Sorry, Bayle. If you're struggling, the Dragon Katana comes in clutch here. The Ash of War can make short work of his girthy health bar. Mesmer the Impaler is my pick for the best boss in Shadow of the Erdtree. The poster boy of the DLC certainly lived up to the hype. Mesmer's moves are intuitive, making it easy to understand and dodge his attacks. However, he is no pushover. The challenge lies in the sheer number of combos and distance Mesmer can cover in his assault. Despite his relentless attacks, the fight feels fair. Then he gets his big snake out. The transformations in Phase 2 fit seamlessly into the fight, adding both spectacle and terror. However, Phase 2 may be easier than Phase 1. Although he zooms around the arena, the snakes are simple to dodge and provide a generous attack window. Nuclear take. Mesmer should have had 2 health bars. Like Morgott in the base game, the fight was over too quickly if you explored thoroughly, and I think wanting more shows how good of a boss he was. Agree, disagree, tell me your ranking in the comments below. Take it easy, and I'll see you on the next one.